Hello and welcome to WION, broadcasting live from London. This hour you're with me, Katie Pilbeam. Here are your headlines. Russian President Vladimir Putin to deliver a war speech shortly. Address comes ahead of the one-year anniversary of the Ukraine war and just a day after US President Biden's visit to Kiev. China's foreign minister says Beijing is deeply concerned about the conflict in Ukraine, which he says is intensifying and even getting out of control. The comment comes ahead of Chinese top diplomat Wang Yi's visit to Moscow. Indians can now use Google Pay, Paytm and other digital payment systems to send money to their friends, colleagues and relatives in Singapore, as Unified Payments Interface gets connected to Singapore's Pay Now. Seoul-based rights group warns of radioactive exposure for thousands of East Asians, claiming a possible spread of material through water from North Korea's underground nuclear site. Australian opener David Warner ruled out of the remainder of the Border Gavaskar Trophy with an elbow injury. This comes as a big blow for the visitors, who trail India 2-0 in the 4-match Test series. To our top story now, as the war in Ukraine nears its one-year anniversary. Russian President Vladimir Putin is also set to deliver his address to the Federal Assembly later on today. Well, the Assembly, it includes both houses of Parliament, military commanders and soldiers. The speech, it comes a day after US President Joe Biden made a similar visit to Kiev and condemned Moscow's brutal assault on Ukraine. Well, the key points of the upcoming speech have not been disclosed yet, but Putin will likely speak on his decision that triggered the biggest confrontation with the West since the depths of the Cold War.
Mr. President, thank you for your leadership. Thanks. Bipartisan support, thanks.
In a statement, the Kremlin said, and I'm quoting here, "Our entire life spins around the special operation issue, which influences our life in one way or another. Therefore, it would be reasonable to expect that the president will pay a lot of attention to the operation." Well, the Kremlin further said that Putin will also give his analysis of the international situation and outline his vision of Russia's development after the West imposed sweeping sanctions on it. Meanwhile, Biden is in Warsaw, where he is due to meet Polish President Andrzej Duda to discuss collective efforts to support Ukraine. Well, later today, he is also expected to give a speech on how the United States could help Ukraine. According to John Kirby, the White House national security spokesperson, Biden will again make it clear that the United States continues to stand with Ukraine. But the world leaders want the big announcements by Biden, and that is the green signal for sending fighter jets to Ukraine. Later this week, the United States will announce additional sanctions against individuals and companies that the US believes are acting as Russia's fuel for war. Well, since the beginning of the war, the United States has sent more than $24 billion in security assistance to help Ukraine. Since the war in Ukraine, the travelling within cities has been hampered because of the continuous Russian attack, but things are slowly returning to normal. Our correspondent Anas Malik tells us more on this, and he has been travelling from Lviv to Kiev.
So I've just arrived at the Kiev station, the train station, and compared to my travel last year, there weren't many people who were coming into Kiev. Now there's a proper ticketing system. The last time we heard a lot of military supplies being sent. This time as well, but not as great as it was the last time. Things are different, things have changed. You see more and more families, parting families as well. It snowed last night, but the mood in general, at least by looking at the train station, you can say that things have indeed changed. And that's what in Kiev, Ukraine for WION, World is One.
Our correspondent Anas joins us just now live from Kiev there in Ukraine. Hi Anas, good to see you. So fill us in, what more do we know?
Katie, I'm here in Kiev. It's almost a year since we began covering it, and I was here last year as well, just after the Russian aggression or Russian invasion to Ukraine began. Kiev is now also adopting to what is now the new normal. It won't be wrong to say. Behind me, you'd see the tram running, the buses running as well. Something that the city center where I'm standing, St. Michael's monastery, that is right behind me, that used to wear a deserted look. There's a statue over there which has now been packed as well. I'll just span and show it to you, and if I can just zoom in as well. They've just been packed in order to prevent these statues, these historic statues, in case of a shelling or any untoward situation arises. So these historic symbols would remain undamaged. By and large, the number of checkposts have gone significantly down across the city. The military checkposts across the city have gone significantly down. You see more and more police personnel present on the road, and life is now supposedly coming back to what is now the new normal. Schools are open. Every now and then we hear air raid sirens, but people are becoming synthesized to it. They're becoming dehyphenated to it, so they're largely unbothered, and that is probably the most scariest part of this conflict, because general people are not. They continue to live under fear, but they are very well understand that with these sirens they have to continue with their lives. So we see less people going towards those shelters. In a short while from now, we'll be hearing from President Biden, who was here yesterday, right at this point where I'm standing behind me. He was here, and then he's gone to Warsaw. In a short while from now, we'll be hearing from him, and then President Putin from Russia is to make an address as well. So all eyes would be on that. That would be very closely watched out. Kiev is certainly observing that. The authorities, the officials here, they're having a very keen eye on that, as to what both the officials, President Biden and President Putin, has to say in their respective addresses. Katie.
Anas, thank you very much indeed. That's Anas Malik there joining us live from Kiev today as the country is awaiting the US President Joe Biden's visit. Thank you. Well, as I say, US President Joe Biden, he is indeed visiting Ukraine, and he's to meet his Ukrainian counterpart, of course, Volodymyr Zelensky. China's top diplomat at the same time, Wang Yi, is due to visit Russia. According to reports, the Chinese top diplomat is likely to visit Moscow today. Well, the Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov earlier confirmed the planned visit by Wang and said that the agenda of the meeting is clear and extensive. He did not rule out a meeting between Wang Yi and the Russian president, Vladimir Putin. The question is, will China help Russia? Well, remember, China regards Russia as an ally and has so far refrained from condemning the war in Ukraine. Well, according to a report citing sources, Wang Yi will discuss Chinese ideas for a political settlement of the Ukraine conflict, as well as strengthening bilateral ties with Russia. Now, in the latest, Chinese Foreign Minister has said that China is deeply worried about the escalation of the Ukraine conflict and the possibility of the situation spiraling out of control. During a speech, the Chinese foreign minister urged certain countries to immediately stop fueling the fire, further asserting on how these nations should stop hyping up Ukraine today and Taiwan tomorrow.
It has been nearly a year since the crisis in Ukraine escalated across the board. The situation is drawing international attention. China is deeply concerned that the conflict is intensifying and even getting out of control.
Well, this visit, it comes days after the US Secretary of State said that Beijing was considering providing lethal support to Moscow, ranging from ammunition to weapons. Blinken warned Wang Yi of consequences if China provides material support to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. In retaliation, Beijing hit back at Washington, said it is the United States and not China that is endlessly shipping weapons to the battlefield. China also said it will publish its position on the political settlement of the Ukraine crisis, with Wang Yi saying his country is on the side of dialogue. Well, since the war in Ukraine began, trade between China and Russia has also increased. Chinese President Xi Jinping has stood by Putin, resisting Western pressure to isolate Russia. The tensions within the Conservative Party are increasing after Prime Minister Rishi Sunak warned more than 100 Conservative MPs could rebel over the post-Brexit Northern Ireland deal. Well, the UK Home Secretary Suella Braverman also joined the rebellion. In the latest, the UK Home Secretary Suella Braverman has urged Sunak not to drop potential powers to unilaterally override the Northern Ireland Protocol. Braverman's call of not abandoning the bill sounds similar to former Prime Minister Boris Johnson's statements. Senior Conservative leaders have questioned the ultimate objective of the deal, as they remain sceptical of the Democratic Union Party's backing. But according to British media, citing sources, the DUP members will not be shown the text of the agreement before it's done, or at least granted a veto on the contents of it. Now, earlier, some reports were published that some ministers could even consider resigning over the latest Brexit deal. Some other former Brexit-backing cabinet ministers, such as Simon Clarke and Jacob Rees-Mogg, also echoed their intervention. Well, earlier, Johnson, he warned it would be a great mistake to ditch the deal. Sunak is attempting to strike a deal with the European Union to break the post-Brexit stalemate in Northern Ireland. Earlier, Sunak met with Northern Ireland politicians. Negotiations for the Northern Ireland deal have been ongoing to improve the post-Brexit trading arrangements for the province. Well, the protocol keeps Northern Ireland in the European single market and the customs union, and it stipulates checks on goods moving from the rest of the UK to Northern Ireland. Well, this has caused months of political deadlock. For the last several months, London and Brussels have been negotiating to ease trade arrangements. Now, for more details on this, Alex Isaac is joining us in London. Alex, it's such a difficult one for Rishi Sunak because he needs to please everybody for this to be signed off, right?
Absolutely. It does seem like this is a never-ending debate in the Commons. Today, we understand that Rishi Sunak is meeting with cabinet members from this morning to discuss the next moves. Originally, we were hearing that it was likely we would see some of that document draft potentially tomorrow. However, there has been quite a lot of chatter within the EU about that they want to focus on the anniversary of the war in Ukraine, which is coming up by the end of this week, and they don't really want to be thinking about pushing through changes to the Northern Ireland Protocol ahead of that. So although we thought that maybe we would hear and see some of what was on that agenda and the changes to potentially to that Northern Ireland Protocol, it looks like that may well be pushed back into early next week. But it is likely that no one is going to agree across the board about what exactly should be made of those changes and how we go forward. And Suella Braverman obviously has also thrown her conversation into the pot there. And she is quite known to be keen on Europe and the European Union, and she has been working with them previously on trying to get some of the migrant crossings sorted, and she has been well known to be Euro positive. So it'd be quite interesting to see how she will adapt to potentially any Northern Ireland Protocol discussion that's happening today in Cabinet. Of course, Boris Johnson isn't there to have those conversations, but he is trying to shake things up himself. There is a lot of conversation as well happening with regards to whether or not he's trying to make his own type of comeback by sticking in any time he wants to try and say, well, I did this, let's continue doing it the way that I did it. Ultimately, Rishi Sunak does want to move forward, and it does need to move forward. This has been months of conversations, and the DUP does also need to be involved, whether or not they will see any kind of draft policy before it goes to the public. Well, that's unknown at this point, and as we say, we don't actually know what's going to be of these changes, but this protocol does need to be put in place, and quickly, if we're going to move forward.
Alex Isaac, thank you very much for explaining that to us. That rather complex situation to do with the Brexit negotiations in Ireland there. But as part of a broader plan to reduce costs globally, Swedish telecoms gearmaker Ericsson plans to cut about 1,400 jobs in Sweden. Well, the move is part of the company's earlier announced plans to cut costs by $800 million by the end of 2023. Now, this is a result of demand slowing down in some markets, including North America. The job cuts are likely to continue, and reports say further job cuts, numbering several thousands in other countries, are likely to be announced in the coming days. Ericsson last laid off thousands of employees in 2017 when it went for a massive cost-cutting program to focus on research to pull the company out of losses. Reports added that the company was negotiating with its employee union in Sweden for months on how to handle these cost cuts. Well, the job cuts will be made through a voluntary program, and an agreement with effect to how to manage headcount reductions has now been reached with Swedish unions, we understand. Globally, major IT firms have gone for a massive cost-cutting program. Many firms have done this, including Google, Facebook, Twitter, and Microsoft, among some of the big names doing the same. Okay, big question now. How much money do we need to be able to be comfortable when we retire? It's one of the trickiest financial problems. Well, the latest Bloomberg News survey says at least $3 million is needed for a secure retirement. Well, when asked how much is enough to be comfortable when you retire, their survey of 553 investors globally showed about a third bet on $3 million and roughly another third penciled in $5 million. Well, a majority of respondents are confident that by the end of 2023, their retirement savings will be higher than in 2022. And investors were also convinced they would get closer to their retirement objective. But the respondents were not sure if they would have enough money saved to support their current standard of living after retiring from work. Less than half of the investors gave that a 100% chance. Well, the lack of conviction on the standard of living is mostly driven by a surge in inflation since the war on the edge of Europe a year ago now. According to the Vanguard Group, the average American retirement account was down 20% last year. That's largely driven by higher borrowing rates, inflation, and a downturn in the prices of stocks and bonds. A large portion of retirement savings is invested in actively managed equity funds. Blue chip stocks make up a majority of such funds, especially for senior savers and index funds. With the hammering global stocks have endured surging inflation as well and rising interest rates, the value of those retirement savings have taken a beating. The global economic outlook and, in turn, the expectations for returns on assets also remain bleak this year. Still, despite the uncertain economic future and recent losses in their accounts, 56% of investors are not changing their retirement plans. About 8% of respondents indicated they would never retire. Me here in London. Stay with WION. More international headlines coming out for you shortly.
Many other